What's the best monitor for your Mac? Desktop displays aren't just for desktop computers anymore. Even though 77% of you are buying MacBooks, you probably want a nice big monitor that you can plug your Mac into when you're at home. And if you have a Mac Studio or a Mac Mini, the monitor you pick is very important. So I'm going to walk you through all of the options on the market today, or at least all the ones worth considering. I'm going to start by talking through some Retina displays. Now, a Retina display is any display that has twice the resolution of a standard display. It packs 4 pixels in the space of just 1 pixel, so you get smoother text and crisper images. In order for a display to be a Retina display, the pixels have to be small enough that you can't discern any individual one at a normal distance. That equates to 4K on a 24-inch display or 5K on a 27-inch display. Apple's been building Retina displays into all of their products for years now, but if you want an external display, your options are kind of limited. And if you already have a Mac, the best all-around option is Apple's own Studio Display. It has a 5K resolution at 27 inches. It doesn't have some of the most advanced features like HDR, which is where colors can get extremely bright, or ProMotion, where it can adaptively go down to 24 Hz or all the way up to 120 Hz in refresh rate for super smooth images. But for a giant Retina display made out of premium materials, it's a pretty good price. Some reviewers found the display sits a little short, and for an extra $400 you can get a height adjustable arm, but honestly, it's cheaper to just put it on a monitor stand. The real advantage to using Apple's own monitor is all of the convenience features, like Center Stage, where it uses an ultra-wide camera that'll zoom around and stay centered on your face no matter where you are in front of it. And of course that you never have to turn it on or off. When you turn your Mac on, the display comes on. It's really simple. And you have a lot of handy ports on the back, 1 Thunderbolt 3 and 3 USB-C. Now, if you don't need as many premium features, but you still want to have a Retina display at least, you can get the LG this. It only costs $300, and it still has an IPS screen, so it'll still look good no matter at which angle you're at in front of it. There's no color distortion, but that's about where the similarities end. It doesn't get as bright at only 250 nits, which is enough for a reasonably lit office like this, but if a direct laser beam of sunlight falls on it, you won't be able to read anything for a little bit. It's a pretty cheap plastic body that gets wobbly over time, so you have to retighten the screws in the stand. You can plug it in over HDMI, or you can get an HDMI to USB-C cable, but there are no extra ports on the back. And again, it's not as big at only 24 inches, but because it's a Retina display, you can run it in a scaling mode where you get the same amount of screen space. So if you only care about having a Retina display for that crisp text, it's hard to beat the value of the LG. You literally can't. At the highest end of the market is Apple's Pro Display XDR, a 32-inch 6K screen at up to 1,600 nits with full HDR. This thing is basically precision tuned for the brightest and most accurate colors money can buy for video editing and graphic design. Honestly, if your line of work is at the professional level where you think you need a $6,000 monitor, nothing else on this list matters because it's the only one, and if you aren't absolutely sure that you need it, you definitely don't, so let's move on. The Dell UltraSharp 32 made a big splash in the news this year because it also has a pretty wide color gamut, although it falls a little short of being full HDR, but it matches the Pro Display XDR in brightness, passes it in resolution and connectivity, all for almost half the price. Now, it definitely falls short in the looks department. For some reason, it has this giant chunky forehead, and the camera that sticks out of the top is even bigger, but at least it's a pretty good camera. It's 4K and it has an ultra-wide field of view. And as I said, it has a lot of ports. It has a Thunderbolt 4 port that you can use for charging at 140 watts. That's enough for the biggest MacBook Pro. Another Thunderbolt 4 port for peripherals, 3 USB-C ports, 5 USB-A ports, and Ethernet. You can upgrade it to an 8K display and still undercut the Pro Display XDR by $2,000. It's the highest resolution 32-inch display on the market. So unless you really need HDR, this is probably what you should buy if you have all that money to spend. Now, how about some more standard displays? Basically, if you take the Retina out of the Pro Display XDR, you end up with the Samsung S60A. This is a 32-inch display with a little less screen space, but you have HDR10 and a billion colors. It's a little less bright at just 300 nits, but it has a higher refresh rate of 75 Hz, and it comes included with a stand that raises, lowers, tilts, swivels, and rotates. It's a pretty attractive option at just $300. On the cheaper side, the Dell S2421H offers a standard 1080p at a standard 24 inches. You can also get a 27-inch at the same resolution for a little bit more. Much like the S60A, it also has a 75Hz screen, a pretty good contrast ratio, and an anti-glare coating. I've personally used these displays before, 4 of them on the same computer in fact, and I can say that even though they have a plastic body, they have an excellent build quality. The only downside is that the colors are distorted when you're not looking at them straight on. But at only $120, it's a good pick. The Samsung M8 is also a pretty good map to the Pro Display XDR. It's the same size, it has a little bit more screen space, the same 60Hz refresh rate, although it's not as bright at only 400 nits, but you do still have HDR10, and this monitor will look really good sitting next to a color-matched iMac. Now this display also comes with a built-in chip that lets you browse the web, watch movies, and work on projects all on its own without an attached computer. Why you would want to do this on a low-powered Android chip instead of the computer you presumably have plugged into it is beyond me, but I won't judge. Well, not that much. Yeah, I will. So personally, I'd probably go for the S60A, but if you want the fun colors and the added screen space, this is an attractive option too. Now let's talk ultra-wide displays. If you have a big area to fill, but you don't want a big seam running down the middle of your line of sight, an ultra-wide display might be for you. This can give you a better experience gaming or watching some movies. Some of them are curved so that you're always looking dead on, whether you're looking at the left or right extreme of the display, but of course, curved displays are a little more expensive. Overall though, buying one ultra-wide display might be cheaper than 2 smaller displays. So at the high end, LG makes a 40-inch curved ultra-wide display with a resolution of 5120 by 2160. It offers 96-watt charging through a USB-C cable, so it's the only thing you have to plug in your laptop with. It supports HDR with 1 billion colors and the P3 color gamut, just like the Pro Display XDR, although again at a dimmer 300 nits. It also has a high refresh rate at 72 Hz compared to 60. The stand tilts, raises, and lowers, but obviously it doesn't rotate to portrait, that'd be ridiculous. So it comes with a Thunderbolt 4 port for power delivery, a second Thunderbolt port for daisy chaining another display, and 2 USB 3 ports. It might seem pricey at $1,800, but when you consider you're getting 2 HDR displays, it's honestly not that bad. On the cheaper side is the Scepter IPS 43.8-inch ultra-wide display. This is effectively 2 1080p displays side by side. So you have a lower vertical resolution at only 1080p, but of course that affords you a really high refresh rate of 120 Hz. It runs at a pretty bright 600 nits and it has 125% of the sRGB range, which isn't quite full HDR, but it's a lot nicer than a lot of other displays on this list. Now in my experience, Scepter displays have pretty abysmal build quality, especially the speakers. They sound worse than iPod earbuds from 2001. But you gotta understand what you're buying it for. The resolution, the brightness, it's under $500 and it's hard to argue with that. Now let's talk small displays, under 22 inches. There's a lot of reasons why you might want something like this. Maybe you're a student and you don't have a lot of space on your dorm room desk. Maybe you have a server running in a closet, but you want a backup display just in case. Maybe you take your Mac Mini on the go occasionally and you don't want to lug around a giant thing. The best small display I found is the Dell P2223HC. Now, small doesn't have to mean cheap. This is made with the same high build quality as the other Dell monitor I told you about earlier, and it has a full 1920 by 1080 resolution. If you pay a little more, you have 65-watt power delivery to charge your MacBook too, and you have 4 USB ports on the back, so it's a full docking station. And it starts at just $120. Now cheaper than that is this offering by Scepter. It's a little short of full 1080p at 1600 by 900, but it's a 20-inch display for under $80. It has a 75 Hz refresh rate, a really thin bezel around the edge, and it weighs less than some MacBooks. Now, as I mentioned before, Scepter build quality isn't anything to write home about, but it's a 20-inch display that costs less than a fancy dinner date at Texas Roadhouse. So you get what you pay for. So if you want to read about these in more detail, if you want an easy to digest comparison table, there's a link in the video description. If you learned something from this video, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm Griffin Jones with Cult of Mac.